Hi, today we have with us Charles Gorintin. Did I say it right, Charles?
You can say Gorintin. It works in
Right.
any language that way.
Okay, which is one of the, I think you are two founders of Alan.eu, which is an insurance company from France. So please, Charles, tell us a little bit about you. You are based in France. How did you got involved with computers? How did you become interested in technology in general? So please, the mic is all yours.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Joaquin, in this podcast. So I've always been interested in solving problems with math, with computers, and so like I studied to be an engineer, and that was like back in like early 2010s. I went to study AI. I went to study AI at the time when people told me, you shouldn't study neural networks. It doesn't work. Everybody knows it doesn't work. It will never work. Don't waste your time studying that. So, as I was gullible at the time, I did not study that. So, that was a loss on my side. I should have tried to listen to Yann Lequin at that point, but I didn't study that. But still, like it was super interesting to study machine learning at the time. And basically, I'm after my master's degree in that, I moved to the US to first study at Berkeley and then work first as data scientist at Facebook, then Instagram and Twitter, where I could learn a lot about like company culture, learn a lot about like working with huge amounts of data, and like learning how to hone my skills as a sort of like entrepreneur and also as an engineer. But yeah, so we're in 2016, back in 2015, basically my now co-founder, Jean-Charles Samuelian, reached out saying, "Hey, do you want to start a company with me? We're gonna change the way people experience health in Europe." I said, "Okay, I'm in." And so I flew back to France, and we started the company that is now Alan. And so we started, we were two, and the first thing we did at the time was to actually write down our values and the culture that we wanted to build as a company, which was fairly unusual at the time. And like in 2016, like France was starting to get back into the entrepreneurship stuff, but like was still very, very calm. And so we came in, we were like, okay, we're going to build a company that's very different from many others in terms of culture. We're going to do a company that works in full transparency, without meetings, and everything done in writing. So that was quite different at the time. It had a lot of benefits to do that radical transparency. So that radical transparency went all the way to publishing the salaries of everyone online, which allowed us to actually recruit a lot of people from the US. Because like if you're an engineer and you've only worked in the US, like, and you move to France and you have to cut your salary by 4, you better know that the others in the company are actually making the same thing for the same level, right? And so having like a real salary grid and equity grid at that moment was really key in order to attract the best talent to build the best company possible. So we did that in and so we were set up to build a health insurance company. Basically, there hadn't been a new insurance company in France since 1986. So
I was going to mention that there are quite a few unusual moves there. You don't mind, like the first one. I mean, for people that are kind of new to the industry, it's true that AI, people working on AI before 2010, here internally, we call them people that were working on AI when AI was not working. And AI in general, it went through a few winters. They started like in the 60s, in the 70s. Remember that the first perceptron got published, and then there were a few setbacks when people realized that it was actually not understanding anything at all. Uh,
So I would argue that actually, like the it's only the things that are not working that we call AI. The rest of the thing we call it engineering.
that's true. That's true. Once it works, it's not magic anymore. It's not intelligence. It's
Not
just
AI anymore. Like I mean, like MNIST was solved by Ian LeCun in early 90s, like, and it was solved. Like it was actually working on like making sure that we could recognize text on checks, right?
yeah.
So ultimately, like that thing worked, but we didn't consider it to
For
be.
some for some definition of for some definition of work, I remember I was actually studying in Paris, and I was studying AI text recognition back in the days. And I remember the numbers that we got for the error rate. It was in theory in the lab. It was quite low actually. So it got a word error rate that it was below 5%. And I remember from my teacher was like, "Yeah, it's like problem solved. It's done." But then when you actually tried it with real recordings, like on the street, and it was not working. It was really not working. Like in real life. And I think there's been a huge gap between what we have now in terms of, at least in terms of usefulness of the technology, and what we have back in the days. But
I would say that like the really big difference is that we basically have solved like natural language understanding, NLU, which was like completely out of reach like 5 years ago, more than five, like 7 or 8 years ago.
yeah, I still don't understand why we don't open the newspapers every single day saying, "What the hell?" I mean, what's going on here? It's to me, it's bigger than getting to the moon. So okay, but back to Alan. It is also very unusual to. I mean, how did you create a health insurance company? It's not exactly the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about new opportunities. So, I mean, how you or Jan Charles saw an opportunity
So
there?
the first thing that we wanted to do was to work in health, because like we figured out that health was like the most important thing we could work on. We had some uh, health issues in our respective families at the time, and so it was super important that we would work on that topic. So first we were like, okay, let's do some models that will be able to tell people when to go to the doctor, and it's going to be amazing. But we realized very quickly that a lot of health startups like fail because they never find a business model, they never find distribution. And so like we could work with the individuals, with the health professionals, or with insurances. The problem with individuals and health professionals is that they often don't want to pay for prevention, and often they don't even have the data. And so the solution was to go through insurances that had both the data and the money also, we thought. But when we went to see them, like the infra was still in the 90s for the better ones. Some of them were still using paper, and even in the business side, like it was really difficult for them to move really fast. So we decided that we had to build that layer, and if we could control that layer of the payment flows, then we could build like all the things, all the services on top, and be that break that we wanted to have as a health startup. So
Okay,
that's how we got into this, and that's how we got that license to become health insurer in like 6 months after we founded the company.
Was it? Is it like very regulated? I mean, how? I don't even know how do you start that. I mean, how do you call like day one?
So yes, that's very regulated, and in fact, that became one of our superpowers for Iron. Like most startups, when they start, like they're like, okay, here's some red tape. We need to be as far as possible from that red tape. But what we wanted to do with Alan was actually to dance really, really close to the red tape, so that we would be able to really go very far into what we were able to do. And so one of the first things that we did was to hire some people who used to work at the regulator, who basically understood the regulation super well. And once we were able like to ping pong with them and understand really what we can do and what we cannot do, then you can basically use regulation as a, a, a blueprint for your company, because basically we were building the things that the regulation wanted us to build. And sometimes there were some inconsistencies, which makes sense because like it had been 30 years that there hadn't been a new company in there. So it made sense that there would be inconsistencies. And so we just went back to the regulator and said, hey, here's some inconsistency. We can't actually do what you set us up to do. And so we just discussed with them and we moved the regulation based on that. And I think that's the best way to work with regulation, is to actually work hand in hand with the regulator.
Sounds a little bit like, this comic where Asterix and Obelix, they get into the douze travaux d'Astérix, the 12, I don't know the English name, but there is one a test that they need to go through. Go through all the red tape. They all got mad.
Yeah.
It looks like you decided to go in, and just understand how the thing works out.
And exactly, but like in the end, I mean, the regulators actually wanted us to do it, like, because like having like new actors, it's good for making sure that the regulation is still up to date. And so ultimately, I think it was very positive for everyone.
Okay, so you became an insurer, and then what? I mean, what is what are like the new things that you bring to the table for somebody that is interested into getting with Alan?
So the interesting thing at the time is that starting in 2016, it became mandatory for every company to actually offer health insurance to their employees in France. And so there were a lot of startups that were like, I don't want to have to call like a broker that's going to tell me to fill a paper form to snail mail them back.
Or fax it, send it by fax.
Yeah, exactly. Like people didn't want to do that. And in fact, my co-founder, Jean-Charles, who actually had built a company in France, like he knew how much pain it was. And so basically we just went to see all those companies. And the first thing that they did is that they just wanted to have it done in like 5 minutes and be done with it. And so that's what we built. We just built like a way to like sign it electronically, and just like in 5 minutes you were done with your subscription. And then we built all the experience for the rest for the members and the health services on top.
Sounds easy, but I'm getting the feeling that it was not that easy. Let me ask you, I mean, in this podcast, we have a focus around AI, and especially generative AI, that has transformed many industries, our industry especially. Like we are a company that started like selling existing images, and now we are kind of changing what we do, adapting to the new landscape. So how has affected Gen AI to Alan, and how are you incorporating it in the company and in general, any new technology?
Yeah, so just a reminder in terms of numbers so that it can give a good idea for podcast listeners. So Now Alan is in 3 countries, France, Spain, and Belgium. We are covering more than 500,000 people in those 3 countries, which represent like 350 million of annual recurring revenue. And basically, we started like we have 600 people working at Alan right now, and so we have a lot of use cases. First, in terms of productivity. So my first goal with generative AI was to make sure that 100% of the team would use generative AI every day. Right now, we're at around 80% in the team that uses it every day. So we're getting close. And basically, we're using it like pretty much everywhere. Like when we're doing performance review, like we just pass the notes that we have into an LLM. When we are doing like for knowledge management, it's super useful as well. If you think about it, like what I mentioned earlier in the podcast about us having radical transparency in terms of information, it's super useful when you have like generative AI, because basically you can give your whole knowledge base to that to those tools, and they can guide you directly to the right answer, which used to be like really difficult when you had like the old time searches. And basically having like critical transparency allows us to share all that information with a RAG like tool, and you can just get the right answer like automatically.
Again,
So
because I think this is where I guess that this is where having all your data in writing really shines. Okay, I have to confess that I'm more of a verbal guy, because typically, my experience with writing is that it's difficult to write it down. It is even more difficult to get people to read it. So in a way, it becomes kind of how do you call it in English? Cemetery. It's a place where people go to die. Yeah.
yeah,
It's where you bury all the things and you never found
yeah.
them back. Um, so I don't really know how it was working well before AI. I see how AI really shines with that. I mean, if you have plenty of written information that you can easily extract and blend, it sounds like can be very useful.
So the one thing that I really care about is the concept of the Chesterton's fence. Um, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but basically, it's the idea is that you find a fence in a field.
Mm-hmm.
Before removing it, you need to understand why it was put there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically, there's a bull on the other side of the fence, right? And if you don't understand why it was put there, like there's two things that can happen. Like either you remove it and you find out the bad way that there was a bull on the other side, or you are too afraid to remove the fence and it stays there and the bull had died or whatever. And so like it was useless, but you still keep it, and it's
Yeah.
really annoying for you. And so basically, we always wanted at Alan to make sure that every single decision that we make, we knew why it was made. So having everything written down was really helping, making sure that we knew why we made some decisions. And so if you knew why those decisions were made, then you can revert them, and you can like change your company and evolve like way more rapidly than if you didn't have that information. That said, with generative AI, there's a great thing that's happened is that now speech to text is pretty much solved. So basically, you can now speak, and then like it gets written down. And in fact, like where I agree with you is that there's some kind of there is some kind of asymmetry between when you speak. When you speak, you basically send a lot more tokens per second than when you write.
Mhm.
But the reverse is not true. When you read, you actually absorb a lot more tokens per second than when you are actually listening.
Okay.
Uh,
I see. That's an interesting insight. So for you, the optimal will be somebody will just say, whatever, and then the AI will just transcribe it and summarize it and give you the right answer, and you will be able to read it.
so in fact, that's how I now work. It actually changed the way I work personally. So I used to spend a lot of time thinking about things and writing them down. And now with speech to text, like I just like do voice memos of what I'm thinking about in a very unstructured way,
Mhm.
which allows me to remove like all the structure and all the form from my head. And then like I only focus on the substance. And then I transcribe it. I made I make it go through an LLM with some prompts that I have engineered before, and basically I get like a very structured and clean version of my thoughts. So I reread it. I reread the thoughts. I edit it, and then I share it with the team. And it took me way less time than if I had to think about how do I structure, how do I put those ideas together. I can be very much like flow of consciousness in the way that I work, and it's a great chance, really, because like it frees up a lot of RAM basically in my head. So for the engineers, we we've seen that already like around 2018, I think, when Predator came on. Like basically, when Predator came on, like you stopped thinking about how to
Format.
format your code, right? And it freed up a lot of RAM in your head. You're able to write things like whatever, and what matters is only the substance. And I think that's really key and super interesting with generative AI, is that since you're removing a lot of things from your RAM, you can actually use that extra RAM to take on like more complex problems and do a lot more things.
And let me and do you see because we all feel, I think, an increase in productivity with AI. Have you been able to actually measure it? Like, who are the people that have a more bigger increase in productivity, and who are the people that are less impacted by that?
So one thing that I've done was we tried to measure it on our salespeople
Mhm.
in our company. So we made everybody switch to uh, generative AI tools. We built some for them, and basically what we have is that instead of having like basically nobody likes to write in a CRM. Like it's such a general rule, but nobody likes to fill it up. So now we like just record the meetings that they have with a prospect. We transcribe it. We format it in the right way because we have like some templated prompts that put it in the right way. That puts it in the CRM, and it shares it with the team, and it generates as well like a follow-up email to the prospect in the right way with the right information from the call. That saves 15 minutes for a 30-minute call. So basically, like have the
50% increase.
exactly of productivity, and it's magic, right? Uh, and on top of that, now we can have our marketing team like looking at all the summaries of all the sales call, and now they're formatted in the right way with the right information, right? And so
Nobody is going rogue anymore.
exactly, and so we've estimated that the marketing people became like 70 times more efficient in their work because of because they could just like get all the sales goal in one go, and like it's all formatted, it's all extracting like the right information.
The other thing where I saw an increase in productivity ourselves in our B2B marketing sales is in getting the right prospect. So you have a list of prospects, and actually you can take a look at the early signals from those prospects to understand which one are really promising to just call versus skip. And it gets fairly accurate. So you can just start calling the ones that you can actually convert.
So in the end, the great thing about Gen AI is that it allows you to actually collect a lot more data in a more structured way.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, you are way more intelligent in the way you treat your prospects and customers. And so ultimately, you can invest a lot more time in the things that they actually care about. So you deliver a better service. And it's not more expensive to do that.
It's a little bit like now that you mention it, it's a little bit like Google in the good old days, right? Like what Google did was it allowed people to search over something that was not a structure in a way that looked like it was a structure. So it's like, forget about it. We don't need to have title, keywords, description. Just give me the text. I will understand it. I will allow you to search over it. It's doing a little bit of the same over, conversational speech, of random notes, and yeah, it's I okay. It's very interesting how you're using it. Let me jump topics a little bit. Okay, you have been involved with the creation of Mistral, which is like the biggest, I don't know, AI startups in France, together with Jean Charles.
Yeah.
And in general, you have been pushing for AI in France and in Europe. So can you tell us a little bit of the backstory? How did it all started?
Yeah, definitely. Basically, back in early 2022, like you could smell in the air that something was brewing. Uh, that like transformers were like gonna change a lot of things, um, but like nobody cared about. Like you had some people working, playing with the Da Vinci stuff, but like not many people actually cared about it. Uh, but I was feeling that there was something, and as I mentioned, I had missed all the classes around neural networks, so I had to fire myself from everything that I was doing as a CTO of Alan and get back to studying to studying neural networks. So I restarted from scratch and retrained myself on that. It was super interesting. And basically, once I had built some conviction that things had actually changed, I was like, okay, the company needs to go forward and move towards like using Gen AI. And in fact, like we were not calling that Gen AI at the time. In 2022, like I think I heard the word the first time like end of 2022 or maybe early 2023. But basically, so we started betting on it, but there was something that sounded a little bit wrong to me. Like we were betting the whole company on the technology, which was pretty much an oligopoly or monopoly from OpenAI at the time. And we were like,
Mhm.
okay, if OpenAI decides to just like uh, put the prices very high and like corner the whole market, like we would get a little bit screwed. So we were like with Jean Charles, we need to do something about it. There needs to be a European champion. Why is it not happening? We have all the talent that we need in France and in Europe. Like out of like I don't know, like the 30 people that could train a large language model at the time, like maybe a third of them were French. Uh, yet nothing happened. Like we had written like a paper on it, like in June 2022, and like nothing happened. Fast forward November 2022, ChatGPT is released. Like people start going crazy about the technology, and so we were like, okay, we need to do something. Let's let's make sure that we can start that European champion. So since nobody's doing it, we're gonna do it ourselves. But we already had a company to run, so I went on to find the best people to train large language models. In fact, it was like Guillaume Lamp, Arthur Mensch, and Timothée Lacroix, and we met them. We told them, okay, we wrote a strategy on how we could counterposition against OpenAI and build like a great company and raise a billion euros in like less than a year. And basically, so we had that strategy. We told them like, we think you know how to train those models. You are like you're going to be the founders because we already have a company to run, and we're going to help you become the best entrepreneurs in the world, and you're going to have the immense majority of the capital. We're just taking a very tiny share, and let's build that because it's going to be for the good of Europe. And so we decided to do that, and we started the company in April 2023. We raised 100 million euros day one, basically. And in September, Mistral 7B came out. It was a huge hit with the developer community because it was fully open source. At the time, Llama 1, which was actually also trained by Guillaume Lample and Timothée Lacroix. The Llama 1 was actually non-commercial license.
Yes. By the way, let's give some context for those who don't know. If anyone still doesn't know who is Mistral, Mistral has developed like one of the largest language model. It was at the time, it was the first real alternative to Llama that was developed by Meta, and actually was developed by kind of the same people in Meta. It was a fraction of the team that trained Llama is the one that founded Mistral, and that's a big reason why Mistral was able to raise 100 million of seed capital, which is extremely unusual in Europe. I don't know if it has been the largest seed round in Europe ever, but
it was, but we've been beat since then. But
yeah. Good.
Which is a great thing. Like the more the merrier. It's great that a lot more people are actually building open source models and sharing the technology with the world. So
okay. Now Mistral has developed a number of models, and the one that really I think reached parity with GPT 3.5 was Mistral 8.7b Mistral, which is a
Mistral is at GPT 3.5, and it's actually open sourced, fully open source. There's also a commercial model called Mistral Large that is not open source, but that's available via API. That is almost to par with GPT-4.
Okay, and Mistral, the X there is because it's using a mixture of ensembles, which is this technique. Intuitively, how I think about it, maybe I'm completely wrong. Okay, but how I think about it is, like we have like two parts on the brain, and it's like, in this case, it's 8 parts. You have like 8 parts of this brain that each one is specialized on something concrete. And then you got a little router that takes a question and asks it into a couple of those parts, and then it takes the best answer and answers back with that. Okay, so in a way, it's like what we do with 2 parts of the brain, but with 8 parts of the brain. Uh, so I mean,
It's like you're basically asking like basically 8 models to compete and give
the best is that
the best answer, and basically it gives you like a really good answer compared to so that mixture of experts that was the first model of its kind that was open sourced, which actually contributed a lot to Mistral's fame.
it's kind of ironic how we are running with Transformers originally was done at Google. A mix of some open samples was also developed at Google. Then you get the on PyTorch, which was done in Meta. So people are taking like different open source contributions or paper contributions from different companies, and we are all building on top of previous giants.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why it's going so fast, and that's why it's so important to keep a lot of things open. Is that like, and that's actually a little fun story about how we came on with the strategy for Mistral. But basically, like when you have open source models that everybody can use, it creates a Cambrian explosion of innovation, basically. And in fact, like that's what inspired me the strategy, the initial strategy for Mistral was actually noticing when Stable Diffusion uh, got its weights open. So basically, Stable Diffusion is a text to image model that generates great images, and basically like the weights became open, so that means that you could run it from your own machine, and that happened in August 2022. When that happened, like in the next few days, it was a frenzy to actually create the most amazing things, and you could retrain the models. And like I still have like a few of the pictures that I had created of myself, like by training a model on my face, and I could make some painting by Rembrandt at the time, and was so novel at the moment. It was huge, and like it created a huge community of people who built on that thing.
Yeah, it's like I think it will be fair to say that the top quality in image generation today is still with Midjourney, uh, but with stability, what you got is plenty of people developing on top of it. So you got things like control nets, you got LoRa's, you got animative that is built on top of it. There are plenty. There's a huge community contributing to that. So actually today, if you want a higher degree of control over what you build and more knobs to drive the machine, so to say, you have to go with stability and with open source.
And in fact, that's the thing that we've done with Alan, and we've kept on doing, and we keep on doing today, which was to train. So we have a cute little marmot as our mascot,
Mhm.
which is like an unusual creature that would not be able to we would not be able to create it with Midjourney. We've tried many times, and so we had to actually retrain some Stable Diffusion tools to models to basically make that mascot in any kind of situation. And it's great because now our salespeople can, like, if we have to go to McDonald's and sell something, we can do a marmot in a McDonald's eating fries and a burger, for example. And it's great, and it creates a lot of like energy for the brand, and things that would not have been possible pre 2022.
I think very often we think about Gen AI like taking jobs from the previous use cases. But the way I see it is that it is true that there is some overlap between what Gen AI can do and what we were doing before. But most often, what we're doing is we are doing things that we are not doing before. Okay, we recently acquired a company called Magnific, which is a creative upscaler, and what you do with that is that you enhance an image, but you enhance it so much, I think, so many details that before it would have been impossible to just do it with Photoshop. Okay. You were going to say something. Please go ahead.
Ba- yeah, basically that what we're saying is that we our designers, like initially they were not too fond of us like using like generated marmots and everything. Like they were saying, yeah, quality is not, it's too poor, like it will never reach what we can do, and it's stealing my job and everything. But in the end, like we've actually had to hire more people to actually manage the increased demand in using that mascot like everywhere in our brand, because we were able to build like to generate so many of them. Like now we can like make sure that it works in every situation, and so we have to have like more designers involved, and so ultimately it led to an increase in jobs. So I have a little theory about it. To me, it's the Jevons paradox. Basically, you reduce the cost of something, of creating a unit of something. So it can be creating the mascot. Like since we're reducing the cost of creating mascot, it means that we have a lot more demand to create those mascots, and ultimately it means that the people who had like a little less job, we need like a lot more because we're doing a lot more with what we had. And so that's true for designers, but that's also true for engineers. And I think that we're gonna have to hire in the next 20, 50 years, like way more engineers than we ever had to hire.
There is, I mean, we have come on this podcast across the Jevon paradox quite a few times. There is also super interesting article by Tomás Puello, uh, who talks about the impact that Gen AI can have in society, and he talks about the latent demand that is usually in a market when you introduce a new technology. The concept is that there is going to be a demand for something you make it cheaper in a way, and it's a demand that today nobody is asking for that because it's just too expensive, and you manage to make it much cheaper. People will start asking for more of it. Okay, and we see kind of the same thing. Like in our case, I mean, this is very specific to Freepik, but when we started, we could only, we were working giving stock images to people, and that's a very specific use case. Uh, it's a very specific way to help people uh, become more creative, create great designs, which is ultimately our goal. But there were plenty of use cases that we could not address. Like you need a logo, for example, we cannot help you. If you need something bespoke, we cannot help you. And now we are getting to those use cases.
The thing that we have in our industry, in the health industry, is that with Alan, we've rolled out a virtual clinic, first with doctors that you could do via chat, basically. And we realized that like a lot more people were asking for chat, and those people would not have gone to the ER to have checked their thing. So we saved a lot of both visits to the ER and like false negatives of people like not going where they should have gone, right? So that's an added value. But now that we can add AI to that mix, there's probably going to be a lot of things that we will be able to do that will reduce even more the cost of asking a doctor. And so ultimately, we're going to be able to provide a much better uh, a much better service to all the people who don't have access easily to a doctor, who can't go to a hospital because there's none like close to their house, or who can't call their aunt or uncle because
Yeah.
they're not doctors, right?
And this is a use case where you definitely don't want those questions going around across multiple companies. You want to keep it kind of contained because it's very sensitive data.
Exactly.
So I see how using Mistral for that can be the only option today.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Mistral is really differentiated about is that since there's a culture of sharing the weights of the model, so basically sharing the model itself, like there's that saying of not your weights, not your model.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have the weights with you, you can't really control if your provider is going to shut down your model or whatever. Like if you have the weights with you, it remains yours forever, right? And so basically, that's the thing that Mistral does. That's very different from an OpenAI or Anthropic, is that we share the model weights, which allows like people to actually deploy things that make a lot of sense in like on premises or on their own cloud. And so you're sure that your data doesn't go out uh, to uh, to another provider. And like when you're in Europe, like with GDPR, you're not supposed to send a lot of data to the US. So
Uh, uh, More like none.
yeah, exactly. So by having like the model run on your own cloud, you actually it's much easier and it's much safer. And if you're working on things that are strategic, like uh, military stuff or like health stuff, or things that like you don't want the personal data to go out, like it's super key and super interesting to deploy Mistral in that case.
Okay, let me change subject a little bit because we are talking about all the good things that AI brings to the table and how in many cases it's not actually taking jobs, that is unlocking new use cases that can actually drive new jobs. But on the other hand, you saw of course like the reaction that we had in many different countries to Gen AI, and in particular in Europe, it led to the creation of the new AI Act. Uh, so can you give us a little bit of your opinion of it? What do you think are the good parts and bad parts, if any?
I think it was okay, then it got worse, then it got better, and we're like in a okay-ish state. So basically, initially, like the UAI Act was pre-Gen AI, was like a 2021 project that was pushed by the European Commission and was fairly reasonable in the sense that it would rule on the risks basically. If you had a high risk thing, like you had to provide a lot more like information than if you had something that was not based on risk. Then like Gen AI came in and like the European Parliament took on and was like, oh, that's crazy. We need to regulate this, and so they started like putting things on the foundational models that pretty much could have killed the AI industry in Europe. Uh, Fortunately, like that's not the version of the text that actually was decided upon. But it was interesting because like Mistral was also kind of built in reaction to that EUA Act, basically. Like it could have been that France and many countries in Europe like would have taken like a stance of saying, okay, AI is super dangerous and it's going to come from Americans and Chinese, and so we need to close down the barriers of Europe so that they can't get it. Would have been horrible for innovation and for the companies that use AI. And so that was kind of part of the Mistral story, was uh, to actually have a champion in Europe that we could like actually help and work with to have like, rather than a defensive regulation, having an offensive regulation,
Mhm.
a regulation that allows Europe to be at the forefront of the innovation and make great tools without like uh, without compromising on our values, basically.
Like in some cases, I get the feeling that in Europe, um, we, we Europeans, in particular politicians, they regulate. My feeling is they regulate very strongly the technological sector because we lack tech giants. It seems like they have nothing to lose by doing that. Okay, they are just harming like third parties and kind of taking this approach. There is no one inside that is being harmed by this.
Which is a flawed reasoning from their part, I think.
Completely agree, because it's preventing those companies from being created in the first place.
From being created, and also the companies like the islands of the world from like actually using those tools and be competitive on the world stage. Because like what we're trying to do with Anan, but also with Freepik and like with all those companies, it's not like just building local players. Like would be a little bit foolish to try to build a local player and saying like we're never getting out of our country. I mean, like the goal is to really like share what we've learned and what we've built, and build like those great companies across the world, and not leave them just to Americans or Chinese, right?
Right. I actually, my last question is about that. Like, you probably saw like this chart that shows, like maybe flawed, but in general, in Europe, we have far fewer and far smaller companies than in the US and in China, in general, in Asia. Uh, and on the other hand, you get countries like France, and I hope nobody gets offended by it, but I think that a few years ago, the number of startups and the size of startups in France per population, it was not, let's say, state of the art. Okay, it was not really there. But lately, it seems to be having a run. It seems like it's speeding up dramatically. So you have the creation of the 42 by the founder of Free, which is a very known like telecom in France. Uh, you have many startups growing up. You have more and more bigger and bigger hackathons going on. So it seems to be on the news like very regularly. It seems like there is a completely flip from the story of startups in France. So what can we learn from that? How can we reinvigorate a little bit the whole of Europe?
I think the first key is that we need to continue to invest in talent. That's been true in the past. That's still true for a long time.
I'll interrupt you a little bit. Like, I have a qualm with that. I don't think we're lacking talent. Like when you look at the founders in the US, most of them are Europeans. Like many people.
We're not lacking that, but we need to continue investing in it, because if we don't have that, we won't have anything.
Okay.
So, but we had that, but the problem was that everybody was moving to the US or elsewhere. Like basically, it was the brain drain, basically. And why? And like I was the first one to do it. Like I was offered by one of my friends to start a company in France at the end of my master's, and I was like, it makes no sense in my software. Like, why would I start a company here? It made no sense. And so I decided to move to the US and worked at Facebook and etc. But now, like, we're starting to show that it's actually possible to create great companies in France and around Europe. And that's the thing. It's like now that we started to prime that pump and basically having companies that start to be like somewhat big and hit like the 1 billion valuation mark and etc. Like we can now like recruit those hungry and foolish, ambitious peoples coming out of universities, right? And now like they learn how to build the companies, and then they can leave the companies, start their own companies, etc. But for this, we need to create a lot more like sharing of values and information. And one of the big blocks in Europe, in France at least, is that there's like a 3-month delay after you quit from the company. You have to wait 3 months before going to a new company. That's 3-month notice. And that's actually really bad for innovation. Like, and that's the great thing about California, and that's what made it like super great for innovation. What made it undertake New Jersey as the center of innovation for the United States is that it's implemented well. Like, you want to leave the company, you sign off on a Thursday, on a Friday you're starting in the new company. And like, if we had like more of this, like, which is basically employee friendly, uh, then we would
Goes-
like a
I
lot more.
have to say that it goes both ways. Like in the US, they can also fire you without notice almost. And in France, in Europe in general, you have time frame to get notice.
Which is like, that's completely fine to keep the mattress for the employees, but on the company side, like, we should not have that term of notice. Um, and so if we made it like a little bit easier, then it would make it like much faster to jump from one company to another, and then like create a lot more innovation. Because like, if one company is losing steam and the other one is taking off, like, it's great. It may die, but like that other one is like taking off, and we may create like a much bigger company.
I have another one that is related to that is, that in California, uh, you are not blocked from reusing what you know to create a new company. There is no, you cannot be sued because you took any secrets or anything with you. And in Europe, it in general, you have this anti-competition clause that they can put in the contract that it's usually well received because the company has to pay you in exchange of this anti-competition period. But to me, what it does is that you shut down a brain, for like 1 or 2 years, which is a lot of time. Uh,
And so people and companies should think of as ecosystems and not as like single companies. And so like, by sharing more, and by the way, like, it's supposed to be banned from the whole of US to have like anti-competitive clauses.
oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Well,
I was actually pushing some local politician that I
yeah,
met recently, and I was trying to get something like this in Andalusia, which is a region in Spain. But I would love to see this across Europe because, you are who you are, right? Like, you know what you know. And I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to switch jobs or something? Like, you're out in the market, allow people to do whatever they know.
yeah, fresh brains need to innovate. So it's super important. And the last thing that we've been missing for a long time is optimism. Not like complacent optimism, but like methodic optimism, where like, if you do the right thing, you know that it's going to work, and you push to make it work. And that's, I think, the really important thing that we need to keep on cultivating, and stop like being pessimistic about technology, and do whatever we can to make it work.
We need a new Jules Verne for the new times, right? Like, somebody that raises the spirits. And it's true that we are missing a little bit of the optimism about technology. And I was having this conversation with another person that I interviewed in the podcast, and we're talking about how important it was to speed up. And he was saying, you know what, maybe we should slow down. In my opinion, we need to speed up. Actually, it's our best opportunity to improve our quality of life and to just keep improving. I don't know. I think that in Europe, you are absolutely right. We have more and more people that believe that technology isn't bad, even though I don't think something really bad has actually happened. I cannot think of any single example that it was, even with privacy. That I mean, there are plenty of theoretical examples, but I don't see anything really actually bad happening. Just life keeps improving.
We need to become much better at statistics and probabilities, and realize that we are lacking
Yeah.
a lot of like, there's a lot of opportunity cost that we're missing when we say no to a promising technology that we could test.
Then we are fucked up.
Exactly.
Okay, Charles. It's been a pleasure to have you in the podcast. It's been lovely to learn about Alan, and an incredible success. Founded only 8 years ago. Absolutely amazing. By the way, congratulations on all your successes.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.